Once we understand why dynamics might be useful to add to strategy teaching, and we've got some idea of at least some of the basic frameworks that we can use to start teaching with, the next question that often arises is, well, I've got an existing strategy course with classes I've been teaching for some time. How exactly do I fit these dynamics concepts into those existing strategy classes? Now, different teachers will have all kinds of different things that they try to cover in their strategy courses, but this list covers some of the typical things that you'll find in a strategy curriculum. Often we start by discussing the purpose of strategy. Industry analysis usually features pretty early on in a strategy course, as does discussion about resources and capabilities and performance. There'll then be some discussion often about what exactly competitive advantage is and where it comes from, possibly something about what different business models are like and how they give rise to competitive advantage. Then you may want to have some discussion about analysing and understanding competitors and figuring out how to have a better strategy than they do. Then quite often people like to review how the strategy principles work in different industry settings, high technology industries, online industries, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's useful to think about how strategy is different at different stages of the life cycle, in highly competitive early market, during the phase when the industry is growing strongly, how to deal with industry maturity and maybe even looking at industry decline. And then there may or may not be something about strategy implementation. We've got this strategy and we've got these objectives. How exactly do we make this all happen? And then towards the end, people may include something about corporate strategy issues. That strategy to do with a large corporation made up of several business units that may be doing things like alliances, mergers and acquisitions, and that kind of thing. So if those are the kinds of topics that are typical in strategy courses, where does dynamics fit with each of those? And if you've viewed the first two of the short videos on dynamics and strategy teaching, you'll have spotted that the major contribution we have here starts with this focus on how resources drive performance. And there are quite a lot of elements from the Strategy and Dynamics course that contribute to that. And it's important to emphasize that you can use any of the elements I'm about to describe either alone or together. You don't have to do all of this. You can pick and choose those that will be helpful to the learning objectives you've got for your particular class and your particular course. So we start right off in class 2 by explaining the link between resources, particularly tangible resources, and the performance of the organisation. We then go on to the very important concept of resource accumulation. It has been identified as being fundamentally important to strategy and performance for getting on for 20 years now, and class 3 really makes that extremely explicit and shows how to work with that principle of accumulation. Then in class 4, this is the real core of where we end up in the first part of the course. The idea that the strategic architecture, the core system of the business, consists of the resources of which it's made up and how those resources work together through their accumulation and interdependence to drive performance and drive performance over time, the building and sustaining of profits and growth. From there, you can go on, if you wish, and talk about some further considerations about resources. It's not simply a case of listing them and identifying their numbers. Resources come in different quality. You have big customers, small customers, very attractive products, less attractive products, experienced staff and less experienced staff, that kind of thing. And also the idea that resources develop from stage to stage. Clearly, staff move from junior to middle to senior, or they move from inexperienced to experienced. Customers may be aware, may be informed about your products. They may be disloyal customers or loyal customers, that kind of thing. So in classes 5 and 6, you'll find plenty of information about how those things work. And then if you want to really make connections with what is pretty popular these days in strategy teaching, the resource-based view, then classes 9 and 10 really focus on specifying those items properly and connecting them to that core strategic architecture that we discussed in class 4. So there's really a lot of contribution from the strategy dynamics materials to that particular part of a strategy course. And what this does is it really raises the priority in thinking about strategy of things to do with the firm itself, things that management's actually got some control over. Industry conditions and competitive conditions are still important, and we do talk about some of that, but we know that it's possible to perform strongly in very difficult industry and competitive conditions. So raising the priority of resources and these firm-based factors is really important. Of course, we start out right back in class 1 of the course by explaining how important it is to start with a focus on building and sustaining performance over time. Management and investors are essentially not very interested in simply fixing performance ratios like return on invested capital. They are in business, they are invested in business to grow revenues and cash flow over time. So you can put that material into the real start of your course on strategy to say kind of why are we doing strategy at all? And a particular feature of that is the connection with the value of business and the value of its strategy being the net present value of its expected cash flows. So you can take that material and put that right in at the front of your strategy course. We also have quite a lot to say about the whole issue of competitive advantage. And rather than talk in abstract terms about that, you can take the principles in class 3, which is all about winning and retaining resources, but in particular winning and retaining customers. And you can talk about why this case example business is winning and retaining customers better than other competitors in the same sector. You can go on from there and discuss the power that comes from the interdependence of the resources in the business system itself. So one firm has a competitive advantage over the others, not simply because it's got more things, it's got more resources, it's got more cash, or it's got better products, or it's got more customers. It's because this system works more powerfully than theirs does because of that interdependence. When we get on to class 7, we lay out very clearly 3 standard universal mechanisms by which competition between rivals actually works. The winning of potential customers in the first place, the fight to retain and capture customers from other competitors in more mature situations, and battling for share of business where customers are not loyal to any particular supplier. And there are some other issues that we touch on that are relevant to competitive advantage as well. We talk about the issue of growth in class 4A, and also about some more sophisticated ideas such as the experience curve, which generates competitive advantage, which we touch on in class 9. So quite a few things about the whole issue of competitive advantage in those various classes. If you include discussion of business models, if you talk about different industry contexts, if you talk about the industry life cycle in any of your classes, you'll find there are many, many examples of all 3 of those things all the way through the strategy dynamics classes. And rather than go on and give you lots of examples of those right now, what I suggest you do is simply have a look at the examples that are in the classes and see which of those might contribute to what you want to say about business models, industry context, and the industry life cycle. If you want to focus on analysing and understanding particular competitors, then a place to start is simply to replicate the static resource and performance analysis that we cover in class 2. If you know what our resources and our performance are today and how that's changed over the past, then you can put the competitors' numbers into the same analysis. And if you want to go on and do that with intangibles and capabilities, then you can use the way we've specified those in classes 9 and 10. The big difference and the big added value that we bring with this approach is that we're not just explaining what that relationship is today, we are also explaining how the relationship has been changing in the past and might change out into the future. And then you can replicate the strategic architecture in class 4 as well. So you can put the competitors' numbers into the same structure and get a real understanding of their performance and where that's coming from. Finally, we do quite a lot in class 7 about the comparative performance of different competitors in the same marketplace. in the rivalry dynamics that play out between competitors in a shared market they're all competing for. Finally, this is a really big contribution that Strategy Dynamics has to make to any strategy course, which is how actually to implement strategy and deliver performance. And we said a little bit about that in the first of these brief videos for strategy teachers. And the real focus of that comes out when we talk about where the decisions fit in the strategic architecture and what that does to performance in class 4. And then we go on and expand on that by looking at how policy delivers strategy through the way it informs the decisions that you make and how that drives performance over time in class 8. This too makes a substantial improvement to the focus of a strategy course because it raises the priority given to implementation, which is typically not really very well dealt with standard strategy frameworks. Lastly, you may be wanting to cover in your strategy course issues to do with corporate strategy, strategic change and transformation, how strategy works in the multi-unit corporation, how to assess diversification and acquisition opportunities, what alliances do to strategy and performance, and issues of international strategy. Now, we haven't got there yet. Those principles are in development. There's a very straightforward linkage from the business unit tools that we've covered in this course so far and the corporate strategy implications that arise from extending those tools. But as I say, that's going to come at some point in the future.